The Scholars Chair presents an interfaith dialogue in remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Our theme tonight is Compassionate Justice with the Strength of Love. Our presenters are Dr. Brian Harrington from the Baptist tradition, Martha Woody from the Jewish tradition, Imam Muhammad Ali Zaghab from the Islamic tradition, and finally, Reverend Lillian Geib from the Methodist tradition. First presenter is Dr. Harrington.
I am Brian Harrington, and I am a Baptist pastor, I guess, in theory still. I am currently working at the Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm an adjunct faculty member there, as well as the coordinator of some of the special programs at the school, including working with the Black Church Studies at the seminary, and so I'm very thankful to be there, and I'm very thankful to be here and to spend some time with you all tonight. And I wanted to start by telling you about one of my favorite images in the New Testament of Christian scriptures. And I am not the biggest fan necessarily of the fourth gospel, the Gospel of John, but I love these words that are attributed to Jesus in John chapter 10, verse 10. And it says in that the second half of that verse, Jesus said, "I have come that they may have life and have life in abundance." And to me, that is the central driving theme of what I hope my faith is about. And I think arguably what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s faith was about there being a world working toward a future when everyone might have the chance to experience abundant life. And that is something that I think we should all be working toward today and every single day. And I think this is something that can hold us together as people from different faith traditions, that we can all get on board with the idea of a future where everyone can live abundantly, can have the possibility of abundant life. But too many times in my tradition, in the Christian tradition, we have so emphasized the idea that abundant life is something that is only in the future, that abundant life is something that we only experience after the end of this earthly life, that in many ways we have perpetuated the existence of hell on earth. And we have made it such that we are so concerned about the future that we forget about the present, that we forget about making sure that everybody has the opportunity to experience abundant life right now, and working toward that future where we all can have the ability to prosper and thrive, not just survive through our lives, but to thrive, is to me a hallmark of what justice is all about. And I hope that we can be a people who are committed to justice by striving to be the kind of people who are working for a world where abundant life is possible for everybody. And I think that we can be mistaken in thinking that abundant life is possible for everybody right now. I would love to think that that is the case, but there are still so many ways that people are struggling. There are so many ways that people do not live in equity, do not have the same opportunities to be able to thrive in their lives, to have that abundant life that Jesus promised. There are ways in the past that we have talked about one another in ways sort of in coded language at times to suggest that people who look like me are better than people who look different than me. There are some times in our past when we have used some incredibly charged language to fight for white supremacy, for the supremacy of whiteness. In more recent times, we have shifted away from, I hope, from some of the most charged language, but maybe a generation or so ago, we would talk about things as sort of dog whistles. We would talk about forced busing, or we would talk about states' rights and how important it is to protect states' rights. Well, what did we protect states' rights for? But so that states in the past could be enslaving states. Mm-hmm. But more recently, we have come up with some new coded words to talk about our sisters and brothers in ways that are not positive. We had a discussion some time ago about critical race theory, and that is one of the ways that we try to prevent each justice from being a part of our lives today, of abundant life being possible for everybody today, by making CRT something that is a threat to us. And we also do it with the word woke. And woke too many times is just a replacement for calling someone black or y'all may have seen the meme on Twitter of someone saying, well, we didn't have a woke Santa Claus this year, which was just a way of saying we didn't have a black Santa Claus. And we are still working against those kinds of things, which are very real in our culture today. And we have to listen to the words of Dr. King. These words that Khalil just read are so important to us, that only goodness can drive out evil. And we, as people of faith, have to be folks who are determined to work toward a world where we don't use this coded language, but even more than that we don't dismiss the important lessons that we have learned from history, and that we don't try to believe that abundant life is possible now, when there are still so many systems and structures that are in place that advantage people who look like me and disadvantage people who do not look like me. So my hope for us today and every day is that we can be a people who work toward justice. And the reason that we do that, again, is so that we can live toward this day where everyone can live in abundance, that time when everything is on earth as it is in heaven, that time, as Dr. Bill Leonard, one of my favorite fellow Baptists, says, when we can experience God's new day. So may we continue to strive toward that.
Our next presenter is Martha Woody from the Jewish tradition.
One of the things I enjoy about these interfaith events is I always get to learn something new and refresh my memory about things that I've learned in the past. And it was interesting today because there was so much about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On NPR this morning, and I'll talk about that. But even just now on MSNBC, they had a clip of Dr. King speaking. And one of the things he said, and this kind of plays on what Brian was talking about, but it was basically, how can you ask someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps if they don't have any boots?
Right.
And I thought, you know, that's so obvious. Why? How can there be any even discussion about that? But
That's right.
but so we are here because it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I would say that I don't know enough about Dr. King, and that's a failing that I plan on rectifying. And I had, when I mentioned to a friend that I was doing this tonight, she said, well, I hope there's going to be a call to action. So my first call to action for myself and for anyone else is, we need to learn more about Dr. King, and we need to read his books, and we need to read the books that were written about him. And if nothing else, read Letter from the Birmingham Jail, which you can find easily online, and it's less than 6 pages. And interestingly enough, that was mentioned in a book that has pretty much nothing to do with the topic tonight, but the person said they had always been inspired by that particular writing. In Judaism, orthopraxy, which is doing the right thing, it takes precedence over orthodoxy, which is believing the right thing. And the joke I always tell is, the only thing 2 Jews can agree on is that a third Jew is wrong. So I think that pretty much sums it up at this point. So I hope one of the things that all of us will take away from this event tonight is some motivation to do something to help mend our world. And in Hebrew, that's called tikkun olam, the healing of the world. I know that Dr. King quoted the prophet Amos, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Dr. King and a very significant modern Jewish sage, Abraham Joshua Heschel, became friends during the civil rights struggle. Rabbi Heschel was very much a part of that, and that was how they met. Rabbi Heschel walked with Dr. King on the march to Selma. What Rabbi Heschel had to say about the prophets is that their greatest contribution was the discovery of the evil of indifference. And Dr. King, of course, commented on that when he wrote, shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. And I think one of the things that says to all of us is, it's important for us to understand what our blind spots are. And I have 2 that I'm gonna own up to. We just visited our son in California recently, and he was complaining that he couldn't find this favorite tea that he liked, which was a black tea with mint. And I said, oh, I've seen that in the grocery stores at home. I think it's called plantation mint. Well, when I went to look for it, and I actually did find it, they're calling it something else now, and I can't remember the name. But then I thought, because, you know, plantation mint is really kind of racist when you think about it. And you know, again, going on what Brian said, this whole thing about, you know, being too woke or whatever, I think sometimes we're not woke enough. We're not sensitive enough to what, to how things that I may not think about. It never occurred to me that plantation mint was racist until they changed the name. And I thought, well, somebody must have complained, and I'm glad they did, because now that I think about it, it's good that we have changed that. The other story that I'll tell, I was at Khalil Hospital in Roanoke sometime recently, and was in the cafeteria getting some coffee, and there was this well-dressed, well-spoken African-American woman in front of me. Very, you could just tell, she's very pleasant. She just gave up those warm vibes. And I thought, she probably works in medical records or registration or insurance, and she's the one that everybody goes to if they have a problem, because she'll always try to make sure that that issue gets resolved. Behind me, there are a couple of young men who were wearing IDs that said medical students. And they said to the woman in front of me, "Hello, Dr. So-and-so." And she said, "Oh, well, hello, Michael and Tom, good to see you. How are things going?" And I thought, she's not just a physician, she's a physician that's teaching medical students. So I had to, my automatic assumption was not that this was an African-American female who was a physician. Her level of achievement, it didn't occur to me. And that's a blind spot in my life. So, and kind of continuing with that, I rarely think about the fact that I'm white. I think about the fact that I'm female. I'm often concerned for my safety in situations where I don't think my husband would be. But I don't think a lot about the fact that I'm white. But I was listening to NPR this morning and heard Kwame Rose and Feminista Jones, who are two Black social activists, talking about their experience. And I was struck by the expression that they gave to the weight of responsibility that they feel to address the issues that they see. And it's like, I wanted to reach through the radio and say, "I'm here with you, what can I do?" But I think that is also a call to action. All of us, not everybody's going to be a social influencer. All of us have the opportunity, and this goes back to orthopraxy, right conduct. All of us have the opportunity to do something in our little part of the world that is going to help to make things better. Yeah. To kind of circle back to Judaism, and I realize I'm going over time here. In the very beginning of Genesis, God breathes the breath of life into Adam, which basically means earth. And that divine spark connects all of us. We are all connected by that. Mm-hmm. There is another modern Jewish scholar, Emmanuel Levinas, who states, "We are brought closer to God when justice is rendered to the other," and he capitalized the O in other. "We experience the presence of God through our relations with other people." And I'm reminded here of Dr. King's words, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." I think it behooves us not to be shallow in our understanding of bigotry and prejudice in our society, that each of us has a role to play in addressing the burden of dismantling systemic racism. To quote Rabbi Heschel once again, he wrote, "An honest estimation of the moral state of our society will disclose some are guilty, all are responsible." And I think that's one of those things that goes back to critical race theory. I may not be guilty of redlining or establishing Jim Crow or any of the other examples of racism in our country, but that doesn't alleviate me of the responsibility to do something about those issues now in the time that I have in the place where I am. And to end, I'm going to paraphrase Isaiah, which is it's a bit well, I'll just say it. So paraphrasing Isaiah, who said, "You are my witnesses, and I am God." When you are not my witnesses, then one might also say, "I am not God." So it is up to us to go out and be witnesses to the goodness that we can make happen.
And now from the Islamic tradition, Imam Muhammad Ali Zaghab.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. I testify that there is no God except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. So with our meeting today, and we're talking about the compassion for justice and the strength to love. So I was thinking of compassion and empathy, and I went to look the definition of compassion versus the definition of empathy, which they're very similar, with one little different, which is very important difference. With compassion, it is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow from for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. And the desire to alleviate the suffering, that is the difference between empathy and between compassion. We can feel bad for someone. We want to do something to someone, but we don't take an action for it. That's where compassion comes in. And I can probably say, I'm going to speak a lot from the Islamic point of view about compassion and about love. And I'm fairly convinced that it is very similar in all the religions, if not the same. Of course, I'm going to be talking about it from the point of Islam, but I'm very convinced that it's about the same in all the other ones. Our main concept in Islam is Tawheed, which is the unity of God, or the oneness of God. That's our main thing. But then when I'm looking at the other stuff, we start our prayers, or we start our food when I want to eat, or when I go out of my house, or when I drive my car, or at business. The first thing I would say, like I started here, I would say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the merciful, compassionate, the merciful benefactor, and the merciful redeemer. That's what we always start throughout the day. Whether we're praying, whether we're doing other things, that's what we always start with. And that's a great emphasis in Islam. The first chapter in the Quran also starts with Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All thanks and praise be to Allah, the God of all the worlds. So Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, the compassionate. That's what God is. He is very compassionate. Allah has no distinction, makes no distinction between a believer and an unbeliever. Allah makes no distinction between a human being, an animal, or a plant. Allah Azza wa Jal, compassion and mercy encompasses all. Believer, non-believer, animal, human, plant, it encompasses everything. And if people don't believe that and say, no, the God chooses this and that, we can look at humanity and say, okay, this person is an unbeliever, or this is an animal, or this is a plant. Yet God has provided for all, yet God has made all breathe the same air. So that's from the compassion and the mercy of God.
And now from the Methodist tradition, Reverend Lillian Geib.
I kind of took a little different tack, and you'll just have to run along with me. I sort of question if it is possible to have compassionate justice without the strength of love. I think that love is what makes the compassionate justice possible, because it said that justice without mercy or compassion is cruelty, and mercy without accountability is indulgence. And so we have to do that fine line in between, the middle ground. Methodists are known for going to the middle ground, the way of middledom. And I think while I was gathering my thoughts on this topic, I thought of the many prophets in Hebrew and Christian scriptures that remind us that social justice is a stuff of the community. Take care of the widow, take care of the orphan, take care of the poor, take care of who needs to be taken care of. And we humans keep forgetting this. We hear it, and we say, oh yes, and we forget it. So God keeps sending people to tell us. God keeps sending prophets to confront our frailties and to cast a vision for us. And I think Martin Luther King Jr. was one of those prophets that we need to listen to. And he reminds us that we are working for love and faithfulness when they will meet together, and justice and peace will kiss each other. Isn't that a wonderful image? That's from Psalms. So when he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, I looked at the speech that Gunnar J-H-A-N, I won't even begin to pronounce it, Jean, I guess, gave, and he succinctly makes the observation that Martin Luther King Jr. did cast a vision, that he took some stuff and made it more. He was greatly influenced by Gandhi, but he is the first person, Martin Luther King Jr. is the first person in Western world to have shown that struggle can be waged without violence, that we do not need to become violent to get rid of violence. In fact, that won't work. So he's the first to make the message of brotherly love a reality in the course of his struggle. And he brought the message to all nations and races. And I think I will speak for the Christians, sometimes tend to want to make this a very personal guidance between me and you, me and you, me and you. But what he is saying in this, it's between me and the society. The society as a whole needs to do these things. And as well, we can do it interpersonally, but it is a societal goal to speak justice. And then in Martin Luther King Jr.'s acceptance speech, he reminded the audience that the struggle was continuing even as he was accepting this award for working for peace. That same day or within that week, demonstrations for brotherhood were met with fire hoses and snarling dogs. Young people in Philadelphia, Mississippi seeking voting rights were murdered, and grinding poverty afflicting his people and chains them to the lowest economic level. These were still going on, so the struggle continues. He's awarded for his process, but not the completion of it. And this was a struggle in 1964, and it continues today, and it will be completed in love. The only way it can be completed is in love, the love of God or our supreme being, and the love of our fellow human. And so, like the prophets of history, he was informed and sustained by his faith. Now, and faith is defined in the Hebrew scriptures, in Hebrew, which is a book in the Christian scripture, that faith is a substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Doesn't that speak to his hoping and not seeing, but believing that it's there? I just thought that really did sum it up.